Dakiga Shakti Ramakrishna Sthidahiya Sarva Vidya Surubham Stam Sharadam Pranamamyaham. This is the last of the 5 sessions. We are discussing the topic, the wisdom of the Holy Mother, Sri Sharada Devi. Here are a very few relevant instructions from Mother. She's talking about faith, because we all begin with faith, but faith itself can take us to the highest spiritual destination. So how this happens is mentioned. Is faith so cheap, my child? Faith is the last word. If one has faith, the goal is practically reached. So this faith has 2 dimensions. One, faith as the beginning, and faith, the real faith, the end. So the faith, the end, is the same as experience. Because when we first get intellectually acquainted with a great spiritual idea, we get a conviction. But that conviction is only a beginning. See, I can give an example. Now it is 10 o'clock in the morning. It's not a faith. It is something that we know to be true. I don't say it is 10 o'clock now, I don't say. I think it is 10 o'clock. When the watch is in front of me, I would say it is 10 o'clock. This is California. I don't say I believe this is California. I don't say that. Because when the faith is so real, you don't make a statement about it, We make a statement only when it is not 100%. If it is totally absent, we don't make a statement. If it is absolutely true, then also we don't feel the need to make a statement. So, at the beginning, when we first come in contact with a great spiritual idea, it is only an attempt to believe. That is faith at the beginning. An attempt to believe that it is true. Now, belief in God of a person who is at the beginning of his spiritual life is different from the belief of a mystic or a Ramakrishna Paramahamsa for whom there is nothing real in this world other than God. So that's why Mother says faith of this higher category, where faith is non-distinct from experience, we actually believe it to be true and real. That faith is not so easy to achieve. That's why is faith so cheap? My child, faith is the last word. So that's the real implication. So, in the old statement in the Shankaracharya's commentary, there is a very funny expression, prasaktasya ko nishedha prasaktasya ka prastava. Aprasaktasya ko nishedha aprasaktasya ka prastava. The meaning is this, it is philosophically very profound. He says, what is obvious, we don't make a statement about it. And we don't deny it. To deny it will be obviously wrong. To make a statement about what is so obvious is also absolutely ludicrous. And to make a statement about something which is obviously unreal will be ridiculous. And we don't need to deny something which is absolutely unreal. We don't have the need, we don't feel the need to deny something which is obviously unreal, untrue. So that is why Mother says the higher faith is so very difficult to achieve. So, of course, in this context, Mother has a very few important instructions. Pray to God with tears in your eyes whenever you want illumination or find yourself faced with any doubt or difficulty. The Lord will remove all your impurities, remove your mental anguish, and give you enlightenment. Open your grief-stricken heart to the Lord. Weep and sincerely pray, O Lord, draw me towards you. Give me peace of mind. By doing so constantly, you will gradually attain peace of mind. One who makes a habit of prayer will easily overcome all difficulties and remain calm and unruffled in the midst of the trials and life. God cannot be realized without love, a sincere love. Even the impossible becomes possible through devotion. So here is a little discussion on prayer. We know prayer is a very useful, very potent, very strong, and it's a guaranteed instrument, means for spiritual enlightenment. There is no doubt about it. The question arises, why do frequently our prayers fail? That's a big question, really speaking. Now, there is an interesting incident. I have quoted this in one of my Sunday lectures. There was a Christian missionary in India. He worked in the central provinces. He was a very pious person. He did his evangelical work with sincere belief. He was a bit dogmatic, but he was sincere. He was earnest, and he used to pray. It so happened that he fell sick once, and the doctors suggested to him to return to England because he was working in the central provinces, which are very high temperature, very, very hot during summer, unbearably hot. So it was a life-threatening situation. So he was advised to go back to England. And then he decided to go back, and he thought it would mean it'd be failure in his evangelical responsibilities. So he went on praying, but it didn't work. And he is well known, famous or infamous, depending upon how you interpret it, for making the statement that Gandhi was such a wonderful, nice man, but unfortunately he is not baptized, so he will go to hell. So that was the statement which made him so well known. Okay, now I'm coming to the later part of his life. So one night, it seems, he went on praying, and he prayed right till the early morning, and he was praying for recovery from his illness. Then finally, he reached a point that he thought it was no use praying any further. Prayer is useless. Oh Lord, I won't pray further. Do whatever you want. From that moment onwards, he started recovering. That's how the story goes. And the other part of the story is, before he left India, he made a statement, I have met only one Christian in the world, that is Gandhi. Now, you can imagine the evolution of a Christian in a very broad, universal sense of the particular word I'm talking about, in the broadest, in the most spiritual and maybe the most accurate implication of that word. It may not be doctrinally correct, but spiritually the most accurate interpretation. He came to the conclusion, I have seen only one Christian in my life, that is Gandhi. Now, why did his prayer succeed in the end? When he stopped praying for something, he actually started praying. So the prayer begins when you stop praying for something, and when you start praying for praying, then only prayer really begins. So that's what Mother says. Now, in the Vedantic devotional tradition, the first important requisite for sincere prayer is a sense of sanctity and sacredness. and a sense of integrity and intensity towards spiritual life, great spiritual ideas. It is this sincerity and going beyond that sense of sanctity. In Sanskrit, we use the word Shraddha. Now, Shraddha, Vivekananda says it's a word that cannot be translated into any language for the matter, because a matter of mental, spiritual condition. When you feel a sense of intensity, integrity, sincerity, and sanctity and sacredness, then you don't doubt it. Then faith becomes real and prayer becomes real. Now, the problem in spiritual life is at some point we start taking things for granted. And we, not only that, we develop a callous attitude. This mostly because of the conflict between spiritual life on the one hand and the reality of world outside on the other. That's why yesterday in the discussion we found this MacLeod, Josephine MacLeod, Sister Nivedita, Miss Leggett, and all these great devotees, American and European devotees, who never knew anything about Hinduism or Vedanta, just saw mother who didn't speak their language, and they didn't also speak her language. And they found something so compelling, so irresistible, but still unexpressed. Or, as I mentioned yesterday, expressed in the language of silence, in mother. So it is this experience of meeting somebody who really believed God to be a reality and not as a concept, because it's a long distance from concept to experience, for an idea of God to God, the experience. So when Holy Mother speaks about the faith being so rare and so profound and so difficult to attain, she's talking about faith, the superior faith that is non-different from experience. So this faith can be developed only by the grace of God. So that is one important doctrine in devotional philosophy. Very often, we are not able to dictate grace and recognize grace when we experience it. I gave the example, a bit funny example, but there's a great profound truth in it. A man who prayed for $1,000, and he found $100, and he prayed, if I get $1,000 lying in the street, I shall donate $500 to the nearby church. And as he was walking, he found $500 lying in the street. So I thought, God, you are so intelligent, so clever, you have taken your own share. So I shall take my share. I put in his pocket. So very often, there is a tendency for many spiritual seekers to interpret grace as an isolated accident. As they may have prayed for something, when it really happens, they interpret that answer to their prayers as something totally disconnected, separate from what they prayed for. They don't see the link, so they fail to detect grace for what it is. And that's because we have not evolved a mind that is capable of recognizing grace as grace. So even in order to be able to recognize grace as grace, we have to evolve a mind. We have to spiritually enrich our mind. Skepticism, doubt, and also the natural tendency, I mentioned this yesterday, our normal tendency to interpret things in negative language. It is, in one way, it is coming from previous life cycles, doubts, failures. So, but then that is transmitted from birth to birth. A sincere person should begin his or her spiritual life praying for something higher. But Vedanta makes an interesting point. There is nothing wrong even in praying for our secular physical needs. There is an interesting idea in Vedanta. It's just like a beginner in education should go to primary school or a school. He cannot go to university. So the beginning of our spiritual life, a beginner can pray for job, for money, for health. Nothing wrong in it, but that is not the highest form of prayer. That's all. So Bhagavad Gita is making artho jijnasa artharthi jnani cha bharadashva. So artha is a person, somebody is sick, terribly sick, praying for health. Or then somebody who is just inquisitive, intellectually inquisitive, not as a great spiritual aspirant. And people who want to get some of their needs fulfilled in life, job, money, wealth, etc. So, all of these categories belong to one single jurisdiction. So, the next verse, Lord Krishna says, Udara sarva evaidi jnani cha bharadashva. So, they are all udara, they are all utkrishtachittaha. Shankaracharya's definition is they are all noble-hearted people. So every person who prays to God, including those who pray for fulfilling their physical needs, remedy of the diseases, so maybe getting a job or getting status, nothing wrong in it. Just as there is nothing wrong if a child begins his education in the kindergarten. So very often this is a misconception in all traditions. Oh, I shall pray only for the highest, because Vivekananda prayed for jnanam and bhakti, devotion and highest spiritual enlightenment. I shall also pray for that. But we often believe that we are like Vivekananda. Before we reach that level of spiritual evolution, we should not take that decision. This is a very interesting aspect in Vedantic devotional philosophy. So on the one hand, as I give the example of the missionary, he really started praying only when he stopped praying for something in his own personal life, with highest prayer. That is one thing. But there is another kind, another belief, another doctrine in Vedanta philosophy. Even for a beginner, there is nothing wrong in praying. After all, you are turning to God instead of turning to alcohol. If you want to borrow, you can borrow from a very rich person, a billionaire, a trillionaire. He can give you a donation of $1 million. But if you ask a person who is actually making only $1,000 a month, he may give you $5. So when you pray to God. So God will first fulfill our fundamental preliminary desires. Then God will give us the wisdom to pray for something higher. So when you turn to God, even for fulfilling our worldly desires, it is better than never turning to God. That's the significance of these two verses from the Gita. Lord Krishna, actually he concludes by expounding the highest form of prayer, the most spiritual, the most evolved kind of prayer. But he also says, nothing wrong for the beginner to pray for Vivek. That's why he says, Udara sarva eva ete. Means all these devotees, including those who pray for health, physical health, those who pray for wealth, artharthi, those who pray for some fulfillment of their secular needs, their everyday life, so that they can live a happy life in this world, or ordinary people. They're all Utkrishta Chitta means they're highly evolved in their mind. Their mind is so noble because instead of turning to some other means to fulfill their needs, they are turning to me because I shall first fulfill their worldly desires, but then I shall give them the wisdom to transcend the worldly desires. First, pray for secular needs, and along with fulfilling those needs, God will give us the wisdom so that we will reach a point where we won't be praying for secular needs. This is one. I can give many examples from the Gita. This idea is so elaborately expounded in the Gita. Gita talks about two types of people. It is related to the doctrine of law of karma and the doctrine of reincarnation. Gita says, those who have done a lot of spiritual practices, those who have done a lot of help to others, have a lot of charitable activities, done at least made some effort to do something good for the world and for themselves. Well, but still they are not absolutely free from worldly desires. They also want wealth, money, enjoyment, everything. But they also are noble-hearted people. So what will happen to them when they die? Obviously, they still belong to that group of people who continue rotating along this wheel of samsara body, mean birth, life, rebirth, and going on enjoying and suffering. Lot of enjoyments and some sufferings in every life cycles. It goes on rotating in a rotating wheel. But what will happen to them, to these people who have made some sincere effort to do something good for others and also for their own spiritual enlightenment? What will happen to them? Lord Krishna says they will be born in such a family where they will be able to fulfill their unfulfilled desires and then continue the spiritual journey further. So, Sudhinam Simadam Geke Yoga Brashto Bhijayate means Yoga Brashta means those who have practiced a lot of spiritual activities but they have not reached the highest goal. So what happened? Because of they have many desires still yet to be fulfilled, they'll be born in a family, they may amass a lot of wealth, become prominent, and then something will happen to them that reminds them of the transitoriness, of the perishable nature of all these worldly accomplishments that they prayed for in the previous life, so that they will start evolving to the next stage of spiritual evolution. That is Srudhinam Simadam Geki Yoga Brashto Bhijayat. They will be born in families where the parents will be good. They will encourage them to practice spiritual disciplines, but also they will get enough scope to fulfill their worldly desires. So fulfilling worldly desires is not a terrible crime or sin in Vedanta. It is a terrible crime and sin when you reach the highest level of spiritual evolution. The beginning, nothing wrong. That's why mother is often referred to the feminine archetype in Indian philosophy. Durga, Kali, Saraswati, Lakshmi, all the feminine archetype. They are described as bhakti, mukti and bhukti pradayini. Three boons mother give. One is bhakti, means devotion. Bhukti means secular enjoyment, worldly fulfillment, etc. Mukti means liberation, the highest spiritual enlightenment. You cannot ask the Shiva and others. They are very, very conservative. They will give you only the highest renunciation and wisdom. If a person, an ordinary person, good person, there are certain very wonderful people who practice spiritual disciplines, but they are not ready to renounce everything. They do a lot of charity, they help charitable organizations, they help a lot of people, they do wonderful deeds, they lead a very role model life, but they have not yet reached the highest degree of renunciation like a Buddha or a Sri Ramakrishna or a Shankaracharya. They have not reached that stage. They should have a place. You can't say, I shall be an Einstein or I won't study physics. You can't say that. You may study physics, even at the most you may become a physics professor at the most. And you'll be still an instrument in the academic lobby, part of the academic lobby. You have to do the research according to the instructions of your director. And Einstein won't be willing to do that. So if we cannot say, I shall be a Nobel Prize winner or I shall not go to school. You can't say that. You should be willing to go to school, become an average professor, not an Einstein. Like that, we cannot say, I shall only pray for the highest or I shall not pray. What happens? They have to take to alcohol, that's all. So instead of that, turning to God to fulfill their worldly desires, it is not a sin. The point is, it is not the highest. It is not recommended. It is not complimentary. But it is not sinful. That's why Sri Ramakrishna himself asked Vivekananda, go to the temple and pray. Because his family was in very bad shape, economically. He had a big problem. And Sri Ramakrishna knew Vivekananda was such a great man. He knew this man, he feels this problem, but his mind is at a much higher level. So he deliberately asked him, go and pray to Mother. And he could not pray for anything other than complete renunciation, knowledge and devotion. There are many people who go to temple or maybe any place of worship, church, anywhere. I shall pray only for renunciation and knowledge. When they pray for job and money and wealth. The other side also you find. So very often our prayer depends upon where we stand. And Vedanta gives enough scope for everyone to continue his or her journey from where he or she belongs right now. That's why there is a well-known verse in one of our devotional classics, that is in the Shakta tradition. Ya Sri Swayam Sugurdinam Bhavaneshu Alakshmi Papatmanam Kridadhiyam Hrideshu Buddhi Saddha Sadam Gulajjana Prabhavasya Lajja. So two verses, very profound. What he says, Mother manifests in the homes or in the hearts of noble-minded people who live ideal life. Mother manifests in their homes as Sri, as prosperity. So those who do good deeds, those who think good thoughts, but still they are not yet ready for the highest renunciation, Mother as the cosmic spiritual energy. Mother here doesn't mean a particular form. Mother mentioned in the Chandi Durga Saptashati is the cosmic divine energy conceived as the feminine divine archetype. So this Mother manifests differently according to our own spiritual evolution, this all-pervading divine energy. So in the homes of those who are good people, charitable people, this cosmic spiritual energy manifests or expresses as prosperity. And then Alakshmi Papatmanam, those who do evil deeds, those who live evil in the sense doing harm to others. That's a clear, this text has got 7 commentaries, Durga Saptashati, Nagoji, Bhatti, etc. Durga. So the commentators say, Alakshmi Papatmana means in the homes or in the hearts of those who do sinful, evil deeds to others, this cosmic energy manifests as poverty. Poverty means degradation, wretchedness, misery. Because how we invoke that energy, the cosmic all-pervading energy, that's what decides the way it expresses or manifests. So when we live pure life, do good deeds, try to do something for others. That's why Vedanta, the Durga Saptashadi has many commentaries. Some of the commentaries say the most guaranteed and the safest way to begin spiritual life is to try to do something good, and that will take care of you, prevent you from doing something wrong. We should not be too much focused, I won't do anything wrong. No. Rather, we should focus on, I would do something good, because that will prevent us from doing something wrong. So that's why by doing good deeds, good thoughts, and good words, we are invoking this all-pervading spiritual energy, which is conceived as the all-pervading divine archetype in many of the Shakta traditions, that is Saddha Sadam. And in the hearts of those who have a sense of sanctity, sacredness, who lead a good life, it expresses as Saddha, sense of sanctity, integrity, sacredness. Then there is something much more interesting. Kulajana prabhavasya lajja. No, there are certain people who tell you, I won't do that. It would bring bad name to my family's reputation. It will bring bad name to my tradition, my culture. So I won't do that. I won't speak like that. So Kulajana Prabha means somebody born in a good tradition, somebody is brought up by God-fearing parents, may think, well, my parents brought me up, gave me such a training. Or maybe my tradition, my cultural tradition is such that I will be bringing discredit to my tradition if I do this, if I talk like this, or if I behave like this. So that quality is called lajja in Sanskrit. So what is lajja? Lajja is our natural inclination to withdraw from doing something of which we may have to repent later. That quality is called lajja. Somebody is called hri, it is called. So how mother, this cosmic divine energy manifests or expresses in the homes or in the hearts of those who are proud of, in a very positive sense, not arrogant, mind you, not arrogance, but in a positive way. Well, my parents brought me up in such a way, so I shall not bring discredit to them by behaving in a manner, oh, this fellow is the son or daughter of those people. So it should not be that way. So because we should remember our cultural, spiritual legacy, and that will prevent us from doing something which we may have to repent later. That unique quality is also a gift from mother. That is like Kulajana Prabhavasya lajja. The lajja is it's a natural quality of a cultured, civilized, refined human being. You call it civilized conversation, refined conversation, polite behavior. This is what exactly it is. Of course, it is only an approximation to what lajja really implies. Now, after this, I'm going to again come back to some of Holy Mother's very profound statements. Mother makes a very interesting statement. The mind is by nature restless. Therefore, at the outset, to make the mind steady, one may practice meditation by regulating the breathing a little. That helps to steady the mind. But one must not overdo it. That heats the brain. You may talk of the vision of God or meditation, but remember, the mind is everything. One gets everything when the mind becomes steady. Is it of any use to be merely repeating his name without intense devotion? So Mother says, whether you jump into water or are pushed into water, your clothes will be drenched. Is it not so? Meditate every day as your mind is yet immature. Constant meditation will make the mind one-pointed. So Mother is talking about the natural restlessness of human mind. So at the beginning, we have to admit that our mind becomes restless only when we try to draw it away from sense objects. Mind, on the one hand, becomes restless because of distraction, but it becomes more restless when we try to distract the mind away from objects and try to focus it within ourselves. You can easily find out for anyone here. If you sit for meditation, then only conflicting thought currents, impressions, ideas, distracting ideas, disturbing ideas, conflicting ideas will emerge the mind. If you open a TV, a lot of sound may be going on. Still, mind will feel some kind of a distracted concentration. It is distracted, but doesn't make you restless. Mind becomes restless only when we try to keep it away from sense objects. But without that, you cannot really become restful. Restfulness cannot be experienced without focusing the mind inward. But the beginning of this practice, mind becomes extremely restless because it's naturally distracted, projected towards external objects. So it should be slowly withdrawn to a higher ideal. So the first stage in that withdrawal is diverting mind into some creative channels. Mind cannot be diverted because mind operates only through the five senses of perception. The eyes, ears, sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of taste, etc. These are all the five senses of perception. Mind doesn't function independently. Mind only functions when it flows into these five channels. So what do is we try to divert these five channels into something positive, so that eventually mind gets a tendency to focus inward. So focusing all these five senses into one creative channel, something that is helpful, something helpful in a spiritual life, then mind slowly becomes restful, slowly. And then there will be less conflicts in meditation. In fact, that's why there is a statement in one of our well-known books called Hanuman Nadaka. Kabirabi madiramattu saunmastu vrschigena sandishtaka tadavi pichachagrastu vichestidam tasya kim brumah. The statement is something. So mind is compared to a monkey that is fully drunk, intoxicated, and also is slightly insane, crazy. And then it is bitten by a scorpion, and on the top of it, a ghost has possessed it. So, vichestidam tasya kim bruma, what to speak of its mischief? This is the very classic definition. This verse comes in Yoga Vasishtha Ramayana, many other books, repeated again. Then vichestidam tasya kim bruma, what to speak of its mischievous nature. A wonderful statement. So that's why Shankaracharya, in one of his statements in the Vivekachudamani, he talks about the distraction of the mind. So it's a very interesting illustration. In ancient times, they used to hunt animals by playing some musical instruments. So a hunter will play a musical instrument, a flute. So listening to this, a deer hiding in the bush will come out and it will be killed by the hunter. You shoot an arrow. So that is one way. And then, so one of these senses of perception, the sense of hearing becomes the cause of its death. So Sabdadivi Panjabhireva Panja Panjatta Mapusa Gunena Baddhaga Guranga Madanga Padanga Meenaha Bringa Nara Panjabhiranchitaki. This is a statement in the Vivekachudamani. So this deer is killed because of it is trapped by one of the senses of perception, hearing. And then elephants move in herds. They touch each other for mutual protection, and because of that they fall into a pit, because they don't take care of the path they walk, and they fall into a pit. They are caught, enslaved, and killed. And then so it is caught by the sense of touch, because that's how mind flows. The sense of hearing, the sense of touch, and a moth, that this tiny insects that emerge in large numbers during rainy season. So people in the villages, they will start a fire. So there will be a big flame. It will attract these creatures and to be drawn because of so the sense of vision becomes the trap, and they are killed. And then there are certain insects that move about in the garden because they are attracted by the smell, the perfume smell of the flowers. So they are killed by other creatures. That is Kuranga, Madanga, Madanga, Meena. And then fish, it becomes a victim of the sense of taste. It is a bait and is caught and killed. So like that, mind is always distracted towards external things, and it is restless. So first, mind should be given a good food, a good focus. So diverting the mind into some creative channel. It means making use of the 5 channels through which mind flows, and diverting those channels, that is hearing, seeing, all these 5 senses of perception, should be focused into some creative channel. In fact, that is the stage number 1 in spiritual life. Reading scriptures, listening or associating with people, or somehow connecting with these great ideas, along with other secular duties and responsibilities, in the workplace, in the factory. We should also leave aside some time and some fixed time for feeding our mind with good food. Then mind will naturally flow in creative channels. Sometimes people ask the question, in fact I don't want to mention, so some of my friends ask me the question, why, Swami, you are quoting all these Sanskrit verses? Actually, I studied these Vedas and all that, actually 45 years back. Yeah, really. Almost 50 years back, so to speak. So, no, I'm not a very old man. So the point is, our mind should be moving around those ideas, really. So, see, we have to live in the world. We have to do many things. Most people have professional responsibilities, obligations, social obligations. People have family obligations. In the midst of all this, they should somehow leave aside some leisure time, some free time, that is for their own private spiritual good. Yesterday we discussed Chitraketu's story. Narada came and brought him back to life. And Narada told his young prince, your parents are weeping and crying. And he said, which parents? I have lived so many times in the past, and I am going to live so many times in future. So I am a lonely traveler. I am a lonely traveler. I don't move in companies. We don't join traveling agencies in our life. Because every individual soul is a lonely traveler. This should not make us desperate or should not make us sorry, oh, I am lonely. Loneliness is a blessing. In fact, we should try to evolve in spiritual life so that we will be able to enjoy loneliness. If we cannot enjoy being alone, then there is a problem in our life. So, that's why Mother says there is a way to discipline our mind. Then in Mother says, a disciple asked if all men or women can get rid of desires. Mother replied, how can they? If they could, then the creation would come to an end. The world is going on because not all can be free of desires. People with desires are born and born again. As long as a man has desires, there is no end to his transmigration. It's desires that alone make him take one body after another. So the idea is, this also actually is an important portion because Mother is correcting one common misunderstanding. I mentioned one misunderstanding. When we read scriptures, when we read about Sri Ramakrishna or Jesus Christ or Buddha, we sometimes imagine we should be like them. We can be like them, only we have to wait for a few thousands of life cycles. That's all we'll be like them. Constant evolution. We can also be a Buddha. That's what actually impressed Americans when Vivekananda said, you can be a Buddha. Now this is not acceptable in any tradition other than non-dualism. Even India's monotheistic traditions or Abrahamic religions will consider total blasphemy and sacrilege if you say you can be a Christ. But Vedanta tell you can be a Christ, but don't be in a hurry. You should not immediately. Maybe you have to wait for a few thousands of years, a few hundreds of life cycles. You'll be okay for you. So the idea is, what Mother says, right now we have desire. So the desires also should be given a promotion. Desires should be sublimated. The first stage in spiritual life is, as I mentioned, directing our mind and the senses of perception and senses of action into some creative channels. And this becomes possible only when we give a promotion, a spiritual promotion to our desires. There are many people who tell you, oh, I won't have any desire. I won't pray to God for anything. There is actually an aspect of self-deception, not deliberate, but incidental. So it is as stupid as to say, I won't go to kindergarten unless I'm going to become an Einstein. Impossible. You can, but you have to wait for many, many years. You have to wait, many decades perhaps. So the first stage in spiritual life is to give a promotion to our natural activities, our natural tendencies and propensities. So that becomes possible when we give a promotion, when we sublimate our desires. That's what Mother says. No one can be without desire. The point is, the desire should be given a sublimation. So then a disciple asked Mother, however I may try to remove evil thought, I do not succeed. The Mother says, this is the result of what you have done in your past life. Can you get rid of it by force? Cultivate good company, try to be good, and in time you will be good. Pray to the Master, I too am here. The idea is, people will always have this problem, and they will say, when we try to meditate, when we try to pray, when we try to read a holy scripture, then mind seems to refuse to cooperate. If our mind will always cooperate with what we want to do, there will be no problem in the world. But mind doesn't really cooperate. So what Mother tells us is, mind should not be given the wrong impression that we will take it seriously. I shall try to explain. When a negative thought comes, we should not go about analyzing negative thoughts. We should not go about trying to understand it. We should ignore it. We can ignore it only when we recognize the fact that it's a natural tendency of the mind to project thought currents from previous life cycles. Because mind is often compared to a bag or a lake with multiple layers of tendencies, impressions, vasanas, vrittis and samskaras, or a bundle with so many different types of tendencies and impressions. That's how mind is analyzed. Mind is interpreted. So there are good tendencies, there are also bad tendencies. When bad tendencies emerge in our mind, we should not give undue importance to it. When we take notice of negative thought currents emerging in the mind, those negative thought currents become stronger. Every time when we bring it back to our mental system, it's called remembering or memory. Every act of remembering becomes a problem because it reinforces its status. It becomes stronger. It goes deeper. It becomes more well-rooted. So the only way when irrelevant thought emerges at the time of doing japa or spiritual life, what happens? Oh, you have come, all right, you also remember, don't disturb me. You should not antagonize. We should not befriend it. If you befriend it, it becomes stronger. If you fight with it, then also it becomes stronger. Because you can connect with it only by trying to befriend or by trying to antagonize. Any attempt to reconnect it with an undesirable thought current will make it stronger, will reinforce, and then there is a chance that it will come back again to our mental system. So this is called, in fact, in Vedanta, this is called Sakshi Prakriya. In Vedanta, it is used in Vedanta, it is used in devotional philosophy, and the first modern teacher, of course, you find this in ancient scriptures so often, but the first modern teacher to expound this was Buddha. So Buddha's long discourse is called Satyupattana Sutta. It comes in the Khuddaka Nikaya, one of the Pali canonical literature. Buddha gave a long discourse in Vaishali. Vaishali was also incidentally the place where Vardhamana Mahavira, the founder of Jaina religion, was born. So Buddha gave a long discourse. He repeated this again. It is called Satyupattana Sutta, in Sanskrit Smrti Upasthana Sutra, which means a long discourse on keeping the mind in a state of perpetual awareness and perpetual witnessship, so to speak. How to keep our mind, maintaining our mind as a witness, as a non-participating witness, but fully aware of it. So, this is the only way a spiritual seeker can confront the problem of remembering an unpleasant past. So, in Vedanta it is called Sakshi, means again the meaning is witness. To be a witness, you should be aware of what you claim to be the witness of. At the same time, you should not be a participant. Then you cannot be a witness. If you are a participant, you are not a witness. If you are not present when an incident took place, then also you cannot be called a witness or lawyer sitting. Is it not so? You should not be a participant in a crime, then you are not a witness. But you should be aware of it. You should have some awareness of it. Then only you can claim. So the point is, mind should be trained to remain in a state of awareness and non-participation. So that is the method of confronting unpleasant thought currents, because our actions become vrittis, residual effects becomes tendencies, vasanas, samskaras. They get accumulated in the mental system, not only from this life, from previous life cycles also. All these impressions remain gathered and accumulated, and they can come to the surface, and that can be a problem. Every time when you remember, you are actually bringing back to the surface, and those thoughts become stronger and stronger. So we should not antagonize. That would be one way of connecting with it. It's a contact, and we should not befriend it, obviously. So we should try to just watch it, be aware of it, but still absolutely ignore it. That word is used in upeksha, the word we discussed yesterday. So now we have interaction, and before interaction, just maybe one or two more points I shall try to make it clear. Very often, mother used to repeat again and again, see, we may come across many people, we may associate with many people. So mother says, if you love a human being, you will have to suffer for it. He is blessed indeed who can love God alone. There is no suffering in loving God. Always do your duty to others, but love you must give only to God. Worldly love always brings in its wake untold misery. It's a very interesting and very psychologically very profound teaching. It doesn't mean that we should hate others. What it means is, even while doing good for everyone around us, even while trying to love and have compassion for everyone, we should always remember there is an inherent an instinctive problem in looking upon being good to other human beings. It can be a problem, because at least we may not expect gratitude, but we may not expect its opposite. So if a person can go on doing good to all and everyone and still ready for a backlash, then only a person can do good to others in the absolute sense. But that is possible only for a person who has reserved his love for God alone. It doesn't mean that you should have absence of love or hatred for others. Not at all. Often we talk about compassion, doing good to others. Sri Ramakrishna used to correct this. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, well, we may do everything for others, but suppose we expect the opposite result, can we withstand it with a smile? Can we remain completely unshaken? You do everything for a person, or you sacrifice everything, but because of that, he turns against you. So there is an interesting story about one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples. I think, yes, he was a very charitable person. He was well known for his charity and philanthropy. So one day somebody went to him and told him, this person is criticizing you so much, but I did not do any good to him. I did not do any help to him. Then why should he criticize me? So the point is, not that it invariably creates opposite response, not at all. But when it happens, can we face that contingency with a smile? A Christ could do that. He could pray. Even when nail was being driven into his body, he could do that. Then you can do that. But it doesn't happen. So till we reach that status, what we should do? Mentally we should remember God is the only absolute reality, one worthy of absolute love. But then we should be good to everyone. We should be kind to everyone. But we should remember somewhere, should not display it, parade it, keep secretly in our heart, God is the only real person, the real entity that's worthy of love. That's what Mother says. So it's very interesting. So, of course, there are many other statements. The happiness of the world is transitory. The less you become attached to the world, the more you enjoy peace of mind. These earthly ties are transitory. Today, they seem to be all and end all of life. Tomorrow, they vanish. So we saw a story of Chitraketu in the last session. So the same mother insisted on taking care of our family members, doing good to society, showing compassion. but at the same time, mother wants to help us. Mother wants to avoid or confronting the unpleasantness of a shock of getting a backlash in return for all the help we are given to others. So in order to prepare our mind, mother says, you absolute love you reserve for God alone. And then give all that you can to everyone. It's a very practical and psychologically very profound teaching. Now we are coming to the end of the session. We have half an hour nearly for interaction, questions. Yeah. Please.
This is a very short comment.
Yeah.
There's that old saying, no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of a corollary.
There's an irony and a cruelty in that statement.
I don't know.
It is a cruel, so true also. Yeah.
Swami, I had an observation, it's probably obvious,
Yeah.
but the other day you were talking about how we deal with people who aren't good for our spiritual progress.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not evil, but they may be expressing evil, but we just keep that indifference.
Yeah.
It seems like what you were just describing with the negative thoughts is very similar.
Yeah.
It's like on another level, but we have to do that same practice with thoughts that come to us.
Yeah. Thoughts and also human beings.
Yes.
We should practice an identical approach.
Yes.
Because any direct contact will affect our mind. If you try to argue with a negative person who may be very strong personality, the chances are that you will be converted.
Yes.
That risk is there.
Yeah.
But very often that can be problematic for a beginner. So at the beginning we should protect yourself by creating a kind of mental barrier, a psychological mental filtering mechanism which automatically filters out all negative influences. Not deliberately, but it's easy to do that in a way. If we keep ourselves in the company of good people, not physically, you cannot meet Aristotle, you cannot meet Shankaracharya or Christ now, but you can read their books. Actually, when we read the works of Sri Ramakrishna or Buddha, we are actually coming in contact with their personality. For a sincere reader who reads these great instructions and books with a sense of sanctity, you feel you almost in physical proximity with them.
Yes.
You are very close to them mentally. You are listening to their ideas. You read Bhagavad Gita. You are in the company of Lord Krishna. You read the Sermon on the Mount. You read Buddha. You are actually the company of the great ones. So that is also one way of keeping holy association, really speaking.
Yeah.
If you are armed with this, then nothing can pierce through the armor plate.
I guess I was just thinking you practice it in your own thought with the negative thoughts, and then you can practice it in the external world. The two sort of go together.
Could you explain further?
What you were just saying about being indifferent to those negative thoughts that come.
Yeah.
That's like an internal practice of what you were describing towards people.
Yeah.
That's what I...
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Swami, I have a question left over from yesterday, and I think that it's rightful and expected that any mother, we're talking about Holy Mother, of course, that her love is inclusive, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, it's not withdrawing love to apply discipline, to set limits. So I'm just wondering if she taught her devotees to love all of her children to love thy enemy at the same time that she would have advocated a position of not buying English cloth, what might have happened in terms of her identity and her reputation.
Yeah, it depended upon the type of people who approached her. There were people who were extremely overzealous about patriotism. The mother said, no, 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 everyone is my children. But at the same time, she also slightly criticized the cruelty of the colonial rule. So there she didn't spare them. At the same time, she didn't want her disciples to be too patriotic to the extent of loving their own country, their own people, and hating everyone. She didn't like it. She totally disapproved of that. That's why everyone is my child. All are my children. So that universality, that's what you find in her. As for faith systems, you find those Western disciples, ladies, European, American ladies who went to her, they actually found that their own faith, in their own traditional faith system, became more intense. Those who listened to Mother, those who studied her scriptures, found new depths, new spiritual meaning in the reading of their own scriptures. Some of them started reading Bible again. Some of them regained their faith. Some of them have become too much in the East Coast of America especially, and also in England. There were a number of people who had lost their faith because of Darwinian evolution, that the origin of species was published, so they shaken, their faith was shaken. So many of those ladies who went to Mother, and when they listened to her, they regained their faith, and they came back to their own traditional faith with so much of sanctity and sacredness. So Mother was so universal. You don't find her talking about any particular religion. You only find her talking about universal love, compassion, spirituality, which she recognized everywhere. You find in yesterday's session, she asked the Western women to read out to her the vows taken in a Catholic wedding. And when she listened, she didn't know anything about it. So natural, spontaneous appreciation of something which is so profound, so spiritual, so ennobling, that came without any effort from her. That's what made her personality and teaching so compelling and irresistible to these people. So there was so universal, natural appreciation of something good, noble and grand everywhere. That's what you find it. This happened to those who came in contact with her. You wanted to ask something? You raised your hands? Then you can, okay. We'll come back to you. Please come back. Okay, yeah, please.
So, can I ask a question?
No, actually, you are the third in line, I believe. Eh? You're coming to that, yeah. Yeah, come there, yeah. Yeah, come there.
Pranams Maharaj.
Yeah.
So yesterday you were talking about spiritual feminism. So my question is, the ideals of spiritual feminism, as per the ideals of womanhood according to Holy Mother, in the contemporary context, would they relegate women would they relegate women to the domestic realm alone?
No.
Or how are these ideals of spiritual feminism reconciled to a woman's role outside of domestic realm?
Oh, yeah. In fact, these modern Western feminist ideas were unknown in the circles of people who went to Mother, even to Mother herself. She was expressing the natural and the most exalted dimension or the most exalted possibility in being a woman. That is a mother. So when she assumed that motherhood in this transcendental spiritual dimension, all those who came to her actually became her children in her eyes, and she became their mother in their eyes. So it is not built upon an ideal or a concept. It is part of a spiritual evolution. So there is something so compelling and irresistible that happens to you when you are in your mother's presence or in your grandmother's presence. So mother in a way emphasizes this higher spiritual possibility, the transcendental possibility. To interpret mother's ideas from a feminist standpoint may not be fully justified, but you cannot escape that possibility when you discuss mother's teachings in this 21st century. That's true. So all that we can say is it presents an alternate possibility where women do not have to compete with men to achieve parity. There is already an inherent, I would say, superiority in womanhood when it reaches the motherhood dimension. That's what she emphasizes by her teachings and examples. So maybe I don't think any feminist leaders in India or even outside India have ever taken it seriously. Even the feminist icons of India are blind followers of modern Western feminist ideas. They are taught, they don't seem to recognize, just a few of them, but those who have come in contact with the teachings of Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna, few of them. But there were great American women also who have appreciated this possibility. In India also there are many great women who have done it, but it has not become part of the mainstream conversation in the feminist conversational circles.
Perhaps because the mainstream conversation is focused on the social context of the status of women.
That is linked to historical hierarchical struggles.
How to bridge that to this? There is a disparity.
And spirituality creates a bridge, a natural bridge. Spiritual value. Spirituality creates a bridge. So I don't think there can be any permanent bridge at the social or political levels. This rivalry has been taking place for quite a long time, in fact. It is linked to the long-drawn struggles for feminist equality, parity in job, in political acceptability, in voting rights, and in social status, equal pay for identical jobs. So they're all related subjects. So going beyond them, but not completely ignoring them, Holy Mother presents a higher possibility. It is so high that from a social feminist conversational level to reach the spiritual level takes a long distance and requires some very enlightened women leaders who are fully aware of the need for these equal rights, equal parity in pay and status and job guarantee, many things, and also fully recognizes the spiritual dimension of it, that motherhood dimension. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Bobby wanted to ask something. You raised your hand so many times. Sir.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
My question goes to the ledja concept from the beginning of the talk this morning.
Yeah.
And this is the idea that one would be inhibited from taking certain actions because prospectively one doesn't want to be embarrassed by the consequences or bring shame on the community.
Could you repeat? Beginning you said something?
The ledja.
Oh, ledja. Oh,
Ledja.
yeah.
So this is the idea that
Oh, yeah.
especially students and young people would not take a certain action because they don't want to bring shame on the family or on the community. This is a concept that increasingly
It's an ancient scriptural idea.
I grew up that way, and many did, and it seems increasingly archaic because there's an emphasis now on non-inhibition, on curiosity, on exploration, and also on non-censorship. So the individual young person is seeking a lot of freedom in this context. But you said something very interesting about it, which leads to a question that ties to the last question. And that is that many parents do want to see their children advance to an adult level where they function well in society. You mentioned words like polite, civilized, and refined. And even though those sound like archaic words, when I speak to families and parents, there's a part of them that does want their child to advance, you know, with all their tools and robustness intact, and they want them to have enough confidence to function well, but they don't want them to get in trouble either. They want them to rise to the fullest extent possible. Now, that wouldn't be necessarily for every child. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But as a concept, as a quality, it does seem to still be in the community. So we don't see it emphasized, but in the same way that you just said that Holy Mother suggests another potential dimension that goes beyond the secular rivalries, it does seem to me that no matter where one falls culturally, that this issue of ledja is still in the air. And yet we don't hear about it that much. What we hear about is the encouragement for robust action. So
the ledja word should be interpreted beyond its immediate context, because this scripture which I quote, Kulajana Prabhavasya Ledja is Chandi Durga Saptasadi, it must have been written at least 2000 years back or much older. So the context of those days was different from what it is now. So in modern context, we should say the natural inhibition for doing that is wrong. That is not for universal good.
But what we hear is that when we hear these notions of ethical mandates, when we hear these notions of right and wrong, in America, at this time, we often hear the comeback, who's right? You know, you get this attack on subjectivism, right? That these are the tools that the patriarchy and that the exploiters and the supremacists, these are the tools for suppressing the freedom. So you know, it gets very confused.
But it has nothing to do with the patriarchy. What it means, ledja should also be taken away from its immediate scriptural textual context. In the textual context, it will have a meaning and significance only maybe in the hierarchical, patriarchal context of Indian subcontinent, which is totally meaningless to limit meaning to that extent in modern times. So it has a higher meaning. What it means, we should not do anything of which we will have to repent later. I gave the meaning. There is also the Sanskrit interpretation that we should not do anything of which we will have to repent later. So something, we should not do anything which is not for the universal good, not good for us, not good for others. We should not do that. I mean, well, it can be constitutional, spiritual, ethical propriety. It can put all the spiritual also. This is not just constitutional, which will make it lopsided. Constitutional, ethical, and spiritual propriety should be upheld. That's what it essentially implies, that meaning.
And in that sense, it's still valid.
Yeah, it's very, very, very valid. It's very valid. And it's the natural, spontaneous, instinctive tendency to withdraw from doing something which is not good for the good of the world, good for us, which is not in tune with the ideals of spiritual, ethical, or constitutional propriety, in that sense. Yeah.
Swami, you read one statement from Holy Mother that she said, no one can be without desires. If we exclude epoch makers and like Sri Ramakrishna, Christ, etc., what about, did she include Sthitaprajnas, people who have through gradual evolution come to a place of self-realization? Does she include them also in that statement?
Those who have reached such a highly exalted level of spiritual evolution will have only desires which happen to be good for everyone. It is psychologically impossible for them to have a desire which would be harmful to others. Before that, we should cultivate higher desires, higher ideals in life. Because these higher ideals present, they give us good platforms to function, to make use of our natural faculties. So the natural beginning in spiritual life is to have some higher ideals, which higher desires. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna said, you should have ego. Ego is linked to the concept of desire. I want to do this. I'm the one who does it. So desire, and it's linked to the person who has the desire. So we cannot really live, normal human beings cannot live without ego. There's a very wrong conception, which is very deceptive, that, you should not have any ego. It is psychologically impossible for anyone except the most highly exalted persons to have zero ego. If you tell a student who is working hard for examination, you should not have any ego, his mind will go blank. It will create a vacuum in our mental system. So you should tell a student, work hard, you should try to strive the highest grade, get a good job, and be an ideal citizen. And should be an ideal citizen, ideal son or daughter or whatever may be. That should be the goal for a student. Now, here you are promoting, you are sublimating, you are refining his ego. Otherwise, he may not think, he may not take studies seriously. He may not have any higher ambition. So it is better to have a noble higher ambition, because that provides a proper outlet to divert our energies, our mind, our tendencies. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna has got a strong language. He says, this ego will be there, it won't go away. So he's got rascal ego. Not a very pleasant way. So make this rascal ego the servant of God. I shall do good things. I shall do wonderful things. I shall do good for others. Once a person succeeds in doing something good for others, eventually he will reach a point where he will have zero selfish ego. His ego sublimates, gets refined, becomes more refined. Christ had his ego. Otherwise he would have listened to the Pharisees and Sadducees. He have withdrawn all his teachings. Christ had his, Buddha had his ego. Shankaracharya had his ego, Advaita, non-dualism, the highest philosophy. And he tried to drive home this idea all his life. And Sri Ramakrishna had, what he did do, till his breath is last, he was teaching his great spiritual teaching. Suppose he had thought, no, I should not teach anything, it would be egoistic. He thought he wanted to teach great things. So every great spiritual teacher, whether Buddha, Christ or Shankara or Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, look at Vivekananda. Suppose when he came to this country and he had to face problems, he didn't doubt for a moment. He went ahead. So every great man and every great woman, whether in spiritual or religious or in social or any area, will have some highly refined, positive, constructive, creative ego, without which they would not have done anything, would not have been able to do anything good for them or for others. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna says, this ego, between the desires, should be given a promotion, a spiritual promotion. That be good for them and good for the world. In fact, every great achievement in human civilization is the product of somebody who diverted his ego to a creative channel. Otherwise, you can't think of anything. Look at Lincoln, look at Washington, Adams, anyone, the founders of this country. They wanted to do great things. Lincoln wanted to abolish the slavery. Suppose you had to face problems, it's wrong, they're opposing, so I should not be egoistic. He went ahead with this gigantic, positive, creative, constructive plan. Because that's why, in fact, Lord Krishna says, my ideal devotee is a person of strong determination. Santushta sadatam yogi yatatma dridhanischayaka. He says, who is my ideal devotee? He is always contented. He is a yogi. Yogi means he is linked to higher spiritual ideal. Then dridhanischaya means a person of strong iron will. A person who has a conviction, higher ideal, and a will and a desire to accomplish it. That is the sign of an ideal devotee. So devotee is not an imbecile, a weakling, who is ready to give up his chosen path anytime. No. This is something very interesting. You can see any of the mystics. Saint Teresa of Avila, she had a strong iron will. Otherwise you can imagine all her problems and persecution she had to suffer, she had to go through. All the great saints in any tradition. So a creative, constructive, refined ego is at the back of all that human civilization has produced. Sublime, beautiful, and grand and creative. I think we have come to the end of the session. One more last question. Please. Yeah.
Pranam Maharaj. I always, could you explain in what sense Mother is saying that she is our mother here? I'm quoting Mother. I am your true mother, a mother not by virtue of being your guru's wife, nor because of any assumed relationships, nor by way of empty talk, but truly the mother. What is she referring to as in terms of her motherhood here?
On the one hand, those who came to Mother, those who listened to Mother's advices, felt that she was non-different, non-distinct from their own biological mother. They expressed the same intimacy with her which they felt in the presence of their own biological mother. Plus, of course, going beyond that, the spiritual mother, both. So both these aspects devotees felt when they went to her. In fact, Sister Niveda's mother had passed away earlier. So when she went to Holy Mother, she felt that Holy Mother was non-different from her own biological mother. You must have met when you were very young. So this happened to many devotees. So this reply, this instruction must be given to somebody who must have had some problem. I mean, mother must have passed away, something like that. So many of these instructions should be fully understood in the immediate context of that particular instruction, that context. That's very important. Yeah. Anyone? Anything more? Okay. Yeah, please. Please.
Swamiji, thank you. And what a beautiful retreat. I just am so grateful for these past couple of days. I think it was Saturday, you mentioned, you made I don't know if it was a comment or if you were quoting from something, but you stated that physical illness should be cured at the mental level, and psychological issues can be...
spiritual level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that an observation you've made, or is that from a scripture?
It is not from the Holy Mother's instructions, but you find those ideas in the Gita. Because when we are obsessed with our body, even minor problems appear to be so devastating. If you don't have anything higher to think of, if you are just at the physical level, the most minute physical problem may appear to be so terrifying. But if you have something higher to think of, see, let us take Stephen Hawking. If he had lived at the physical level, without his interest in science and physics and so on, he won't be able to have any contentment. So he could elevate his own life ideal to something higher beyond the physical. Now there are people who face certain problems, very deep psychological problems, mostly because they analyze, and many of the psychological problems cannot and do not have permanent solution at the psychological level. They don't reveal it actually. Because the pharmaceutical lobby is at the back, breathing heavily or down your neck. But it's a fact. You can postpone your problem. You can make some of the symptoms disappear, the problems remain, will come back again after some time. But suppose if he's a spiritual seeker who can think of these all psychological problems as part of mind, which is just part of our, just an insignificant part of our real being. We are something far beyond the mind and body. If we can think of ourselves as something that goes beyond mind, that transcends the mind, then we will be able to look at even psychological problems as something not devastating. It's a problem, but not something that is so devastating or damaging. So that's the idea behind it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Just a couple of quick thoughts. There's a very famous essay that Carl Jung wrote, and at the end of it, he says that almost everybody who came to him with a psychological problem, behind that problem was a spiritual need, a spiritual yearning that was unfulfilled. And he was convinced that almost all psychological problems would go back to a spiritual yearning, a spiritual emptiness that had to be filled. And then also to go back to the idea of the ego, I was thinking of what Jesus said, who certainly had a very small ego, but he did say, of the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. So he acknowledged that there was a me, but the Father was the source and the doer. And he says, I can of mine own self do nothing, but he did have a self.
Yeah.
The pencil.
Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you. And also, thank you.
Link to the Father ideal made his ego so spiritual and universal. Yes. Please continue. You should not stop. No, you should continue.
No, I just wanted to reiterate what Karen said about this retreat, Swami. It's been just simply marvelous, and thank you so much.
I think Carl Jung also mentioned about the problem of loss of faith. In those days, he mentions that loss of faith is a cause of many of the problems. He did not believe in religion as normally understood and defined, but he refers to the loss of faith in those days. And that's a very... So thank you so much, and your questions help me to come back, give more details. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.